I think Rival has reach adjustment. Isn't that what that is?
I don't know, man.
We're experts. That does something. We're back. What do we got going on today?
We've been long anticipating 105 Di2, which is finally here.
So everyone's caught up. Everyone's on 12 now.
Which I think is Trevor's way of saying we're going to compare the 105 Di2 with SRAM's entry-level electronic group set, rival eTap AXS, which is a lot of letters. Yeah, we're going to figure out which one we prefer.
Or does it matter at all? We'll find out. Well, one of the first things you think about when you see a new group set is definitely the aesthetics.
Which is very, very subjective, and we realize that. But a bike that you think looks nice is probably going to be one that you ride more than what you think is ugly. But the big difference is just the size of the derailleurs. I think the 105 derailleurs are a lot smaller, sleeker. They don't have batteries attached to them, which is a big reason why they're smaller. I think the shifters overall are smaller, more rounded, less angular. The crank is probably the most geometric shape of this group set, and I actually think it looks kind of nice.
It looks almost exactly like the Dura-Ace with a different word on it.
Yeah, it's funny how Shimano does that, right? I like the way 105 looks. I think it looks mean.
It just looks like a fast group set. And then you have Rival, which is a little bit more utilitarian. It has a little bit more hard angles going on. The derailleur has the battery attached, so naturally it looks a little larger.
The smaller chain rings kind of throw me off a little bit. As maybe more of an old school roadie, I like the big chain ring. It says go fast. I think my favorite part of the looks of the group set is definitely the levers.
And I think SRAM oftentimes seems to choose function over style.
I think the new 105 is the group set that I prefer visually.
Honestly, I think right now the two bikes that they're on, it looks good where they are. I think if you flipped it, it would be bad.
Next on our list is something that I'm deciding to call electronic usability, how these group sets are to use in terms of their electronics.
SRAM for a long time had a leg up in the world of usability. They definitely focused on putting the user first and making it easy to understand. They also were very quick to integrate Bluetooth connection into their group set so that you can easily update anything with your phone. Whereas Shimano required special dongles, tools, and it was just a bit of a hassle to connect.
I mean, you had to plug it into a PC, which not a lot of people...
Or buy an expensive Bluetooth adapter that should have just been built in from the get-go.
Right, they've now built Bluetooth directly into the rear derailleur. You have a phone app that you can customize the group set with.
Much like what SRAM has been doing.
Where Shimano, it kind of pulls ahead is general battery life. There's one charging port. You just have to plug it in, I feel like every 3 months. Whereas with SRAM, not only do you have to charge multiple batteries, the batteries don't hold as much charge. You're probably, if you ride a lot, you're probably doing it weekly or every 2 weeks.
I have been saved by the ability to swap a rear derailleur battery to a front derailleur and vice versa. If I was riding Di2, that might not have happened.
Personally, I'm going to give this one to Shimano. I prefer the longer battery life. I like the Shimano app a little bit better.
I do think that SRAM's paddle shifting style, especially now that electronic group sets are getting to a lower price point, is going to be an easier to understand system for a new rider who might not have much experience shifting in the traditional sense of a road bike.
That actually brings me to another point. I really, really, really do not like that I can't shift up and down the cassette with one hand. That really is actually a thing that bothers me. And I know people love eTap style shifting. I know plenty of people really appreciate it. It is, in theory, more intuitive, but that is one thing I wish SRAM would fix, is add the ability to customize controls. Now we're going to talk about shifting, which I guess is shift speed, performance, arguably the important things about a drivetrain.
Right. The things that you really want them to get right.
Both these drivetrains are very, very close. We are talking very minor differences in performance.
Electronic group sets take a lot of the user error out of shifting. There's no more accidental overshifts when you swing the lever too far. You're not accidentally downshifting on a double tap lever.
Yeah, but then you get into other stuff when you're riding with gloves, these buttons are pretty small. I feel like first generation Di2, these buttons were flat even, and you could sometimes not tell the difference, especially with gloves.
Which was a big win. SRAM had a leg up in that regard, where in the winter you just had 2 little paddles to hit.
For anyone looking at 105 Di2 that's ridden previous generation Di2 stuff, this front derailleur will look very familiar because as far as I can tell, it is the old Ultegra front derailleur from 11 speed. But at the same time, SRAM has done a very similar thing in that the rival motors are identical to Force and Red.
Right.
The derailleurs function the same. And I've even heard some people claim that Rival is a little bit faster. I'm not sure I believe that 100%, but that's what some folks have said. When you're shifting one gear, Shimano is faster. When you're shifting multiple gears, for instance, you're going from the top of the cassette to the bottom of the cassette, they are very much neck and neck.
Okay.
They both shift really well, and it's really gonna come down to kind of like all the other features of the group set and what you want to do. One of the things I actually think SRAM does have an advantage with, even though I'm not a huge fan of this, is the gear range. It's a wider gear range, both in terms of the easier gear, especially when you get into the subcompact cranks that are available for Rival, and the harder gear. So there's bigger top speed potential with the 4810 versus, I believe, the 5011.
Some people might gravitate towards 105 in the sense that they've stuck with the more traditional chainring and cassette setup. There's still only a 11 tooth at the bottom, no 10 tooth, but they did expand the range a bit, so you do still get a 1-to-1 in the rear, but it doesn't match up with what you can do with something like Rival.
You can go beyond a 1-to-1 even with the largest crankset available. So the biggest crankset for SRAM is a 4835, and you have the 1036 in the back, which gives you a greater than a 1-to-1 on the low end, and then a very tall big gear. You know, the main argument against the 10-tooth cog is it creates more drivetrain friction. And this is a thing that Shimano will tell you, like 105, Ultegra, Dura-Ace, they are groups designed around road and road racing. SRAM definitely feels like they want to design parts that are capable kind of everywhere, and I think that's something with the gear range, especially for Rival, like it is a group set that would be very comfortable off-road.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very easy group set to swap from a 2x system to a 1x system. It's easy to increase your range, but you can also get a tighter spread in the back, and really if you are the kind of person looking to have one bike to do it all, Rival might actually be the better group set where you can set it up.
I don't like it, but I think Rival kind of has 105 beat. It's too close. Next up on our list is, I guess, lever ergonomics, just kind of how they feel in the hand.
Another important feature of what you're experiencing while you're riding it.
I think we should actually pull these out of the stands because it's kind of hard to hold these. The first big difference is kind of like these are just much slimmer, narrower. I think these are a bit wider.
Both levers you can get like a full hand grip behind the brake lever.
Definitely. I think for some people the reach of these levers is actually going to change their fit, and this is something that Shimano kind of mentioned when they came out originally, is like the reach on these grows, so that might affect people's stem length.
Yeah, I do think that's a little bit of a reaction to the way probably the professional peloton is setting up their bikes, with narrower bars getting a little bit further out front, and you see a lot more resting on the tops of the hoods.
What you're saying is that Shimano is designing their stuff around professional racers, whereas maybe SRAM is not doing that as much?
There might be something like that happening.
I really like the slimmer, kind of narrower, smaller feel of these. We can talk a little bit about brake feel. The 105 stuff doesn't feel as good as Dura-Ace and Ultegra. It doesn't have the servo wave built in, so the lever pull is a lot shorter. There's a lot less modulation. These are still really good brakes.
They're going to feel more like the last generation of.
Yes.
So if you're coming off of 11-speed Dura-Ace or 11-speed Ultegra, this isn't going to feel unfamiliar.
I don't know why you would be going from Dura-Ace, 12-speed Dura-Ace to 12-speed 105, but...
Probably not, but SRAM's hydraulic road brakes have been pretty dialed for quite some time. You can really feel modulation. I feel like it offers a lot of control when braking on SRAM systems, whereas Shimano traditionally felt a little bit more off and on.
I mean, I think in terms of the actual stopping power at the brakes, both hydraulic systems are really good, but the way they feel is going to be a little different. If you like kind of a firmer on-off, like you know exactly when the brakes are engaged feeling with maybe a little less modulation, 105's for you. I think if you prefer finer control. I don't want to say vague because these brakes actually feel really nice, and there's definitely like a very solid feel to them. There's kind of more to the throw.
Yeah, I've always found with SRAM's brakes, you can feel more that you're actually pushing the fluid through the system, if that makes sense, where you kind of like know that, okay, I'm at this point of my braking, whereas Shimano feels more like a button click. I think in this case, Rival versus 105, I might pick Rival just for a brake feel that I'm more comfortable with.
Look, riding in the winter, eTap is just going to be easier with gloves. It's very simple, harder gear, easier gear. With this, especially if you have it set up kind of to the default where you do the rear shifting here and the front shifting there, and you're wearing like especially lobster claws, you're gonna screw up a couple of shifts.
Yeah.
Like it's just, there's no way getting around it. The buttons are very close together. They're pretty small. They're definitely designed around summer riding.
Oh,
like
yeah.
If you spend a lot of your time riding with gloves on, SRAM's just more precise. It's just going to be more precise. It's going to be easier. Overall, I think a better experience with gloves.
So if you have Shimano, just ride Zwift. Yes, there's reach adjustment on.
All right, so there's reach adjustment on both of these.
So if you're riding with smaller hands and you feel like you can never reach your brake levers, it doesn't matter which one you pick. I like light bikes. Like many other cyclists, there is the pursuit of making your bike weigh less.
Let's be realistic. If you are a self-professed weight weenie, you're probably not buying either of these group sets.
This is true.
That's not to say that people don't care about how much their bikes weigh.
Right.
When eTap Rival first came out, it was notoriously the heaviest group set ever made, basically.
I mean,
it weighs 3,200 grams.
Insert pounds.
That's a lot.
It's a lot, yeah.
For instance, right now we have that group set on a Canyon Ultimate, which with an Ultegra 11-speed build is a 16-pound bike.
Right, and with a red build, which
it is you could sub 15,
14,
with
13.
pedals.
So, Rival, really not a lightweight group set. He's shocked.
I think if you're a weight weenie, you're probably not buying either of these group sets, but people still care about how much their bikes weigh, and 105 is lighter than Rival. Rival is notoriously one of the heaviest group sets ever made. It's 3,200 grams.
Not light.
Not light. 105 is roughly 300 grams lighter. It's 2,992 grams.
Not insignificant.
Not insignificant. That's a 300 gram difference, which in pounds is...
It's almost a pound.
It's not an insignificant difference between the two. That kind of brings us to the price difference. Rival is a lot cheaper.
$500 cheaper?
I was going to say $450, but that's roughly $500. Yeah, let's just say it's $450 cheaper.
Right.
Especially in this price range, $450 can be a big difference.
It's a large percentage of the whole price of a bike.
Yes, you're looking at roughly $1,409 for a Rival eTap AXS group set without a power meter. And you're looking at $1,886 for a Shimano 105 Di2 group set, also without a power meter. Crucially, there is no option to add a power meter to 105 Di2. With Rival, you can opt to add a power meter. It kind of erases that price difference.
But then you're getting a power meter.
That one's heavier and it costs less. This one is more expensive and it weighs less.
Yeah.
It's roughly the general dynamic you have in cycling.
Yeah, pay more, weigh less.
We're kind of trying to wrap this up. I think one way we're going to do it is we're going to talk about our favorite features for each group set. Let's start with 105.
So 105, things that I'm really liking about 105 is I do really, really, really appreciate that they stuck with the same free hub body standard that they've been using for the last few group sets, which means if you have a bunch of wheels, you can throw your new 12-speed cassette on those wheels and off you go. Whereas with SRAM, you're buying $200 to $500 worth of free hub bodies for your 5 race wheels, and next thing you know,
you're assuming a lot about how many wheels people have, but basically,
either way,
I agree. Like, if you're upgrading to a 12-speed electronic group set, and you're not somebody that's already in the AXS free hub body system of cassettes and free hub bodies and wheels, this is just a lot easier.
It just simplifies because you're not having to buy a new standard. Something that Shimano will not tell you to do, you can get away with running a different crankset. In our experience, it works fine shifting-wise.
And there are more companies now coming out with tooth profiles that are better suited to 12-speed Shimano. If you're somebody that has a third-party crankset, you could potentially get new chainrings for it. You could potentially use your old chainrings for it, which we don't recommend. It will work. It will not work as well as it's supposed to. My favorite feature for 105, and this is something that all Di2 group sets share, is the auto trim. The front derailleur will automatically move as you run through the cassette, meaning that you shouldn't get chain rub in the big cogs or the little cogs. The derailleur just automatically adjusts it, keeps it nice and quiet. Personally, I appreciate that. I think it's one of those like nice little touches that Shimano added to this group set, which fully utilizes the fact that it is an electronic group set.
What's a favorite thing about Rival?
You know, I said it before, I'll say it again, the gear range. There's just more gears. You have a much easier gear. You have a greater than a 1-to-1 with the 35-36, and then you have a bigger top end gear with the 48-10. There's just more range. There's still 12 speeds back there, so you still have nice small tooth jump, like gear change jumps. It's nice. If you need that gear range, you just don't have it with 105. So like SRAM kind of kills it there.
Okay.
My other favorite feature with Rival is just the ability to customize the system. The eTap and the AXS ecosystem is all very much plug and play. Like if you go with the Rival group set, you can put in a different crank, you can put in different derailleurs, you can put in different cassettes, you can add remote shift buttons, you can add a dropper.
Yeah.
There's all these options to set this group set up to kind of do the thing that you want it to do and be more specific to your use case. Whereas 105 is really just a very traditional dedicated road group set, and it does that really well.
Exactly. My favorite feature, you've covered a few features I like about Rival, but I still really like the brake feel on Rival. The way I brake, it just makes more sense to me. I like feeling a little bit more modulation, and just to me, I feel like I have a little bit more control with the SRAM system, so I'll give that as my favorite feature for Rival.
This is where like that favorites argument really falls apart. If you're buying a road bike group set and you primarily ride and race road, I think 105 is gonna suit you better. If you're doing any kind of gravel, off-road, all-road riding, I mean, that's what my gravel bike has. It has eTap on it. I think with SRAM, it's the gear range, it's the customization. If that's what you need and that's what you want, how you want to set up your bike, with a dropper, with a 1x, with a 2x, with blips, you kind of have to gravitate towards the SRAM system. But if you're racing road and you just want to go fast on some skinny tires, this is kind of the way to go. It's lighter. I think the shifting is really good. I think the system is familiar. I think it works really well.
They're both very good group sets. Most people will not be disappointed if they get one or the other.
I know, but are we doing that like cliche thing where like test editors are kind of like, I don't know, it depends.
All right, fine. 105's better. Personally, I would buy a 105 bike before I bought a Rival bike. If I was buying a road bike for road racing, fast road riding, 105 every day. If I'm endurance, gravel, rough, trail, whatever, it's Rival.
That's the thing we forgot to mention. The SRAM has a clutch in the rear derailleur, which makes it inherently a smoother system on off-road surfaces. I completely forgot to talk about that.
Where are we now?
If we're building a gravel all-road thing,
Rival.
If we're building a road bike,
105.
Okay, all right, I think I can live with that. I think we've like kind of decided this, but I also think people are gonna have some opinions.
Yeah, so tell us if you think we're wrong. We'll still probably disagree with you.
Yeah, I'll argue with you in the comments all day.
Maybe you're a Campy fan and none of this matters at all.
Yeah, we'd love to hear from all the Campy fans.
I like Campy.